Knesset Speaker Edelstein, thank you so much for speaking to VOA's Persian service today.
Pleasure.
We heard U.S. Vice President Mike Pence talk about the Iran nuclear deal and describe it, as President Trump has, as a disaster. What are Israel and the U.S. going to do to fix this situation?
Well, I would quote Vice President Pence again, and I would say he said, the deal has to be fixed. That's exactly the idea. It's not a kind of a game where you say, okay, we don't see any deal, we don't recognize the deal, we have to fix the deal, with the ultimate goal being not to postpone Iran's ability to get nuclear weapons, but rather to seize this process once and for all. There are two examples, a successful one when the world dealt with Libya, and a terrible one when the world dealt with North Korea. And we all know the results. North Korea is a small and non-important country, but with nuclear weapons it's a threat to the whole world. Libya is not a nuclear power. That's how we have to treat the Iranians right now. There is no reason in the world, in a country like Iran, to have nuclear energy and to have nuclear weapons.
What do you think Israel is going to do to try to achieve an improvement to the deal as you see it?
I think that we are working all the time on the international arena, trying to keep the issue on the agenda, not to let the world believe that in the last couple of years everything's already fine because a deal was signed and many important players, United States, China, Russia, European Union, are all behind the deal. We have to provide information, and we know for a fact what the Iranians are up to. And once again, you know, we can't decide that in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's none of our business. It will be the business of the whole world if Iranians, God forbid, become nuclear. And we have to understand that in this area, the Middle East, automatically it will lead to a situation where 5, 6 different countries will start the nuclear race because they won't tolerate the situation when the Iranians will have nuclear weapons and they won't.
We also heard Vice President Pence talk about other steps that the U.S. is taking to put the pressure on Iran in terms of sanctions. What is Israel going to do also outside of the nuclear deal to try to increase pressure on Iran?
Well, as I've said, I'm talking to my colleagues all the time, actually finishing this important visit of the American Vice President. I'm traveling to Brussels, having meetings in the European Parliament and the Belgian Parliament with ministers of the European Union. I'm going to raise these issues with them, to explain the situation to them, to give them the real picture. And I think that there is one more thing to add here. Iranian regime that first and foremost oppresses its own people does it, as we've seen just a couple of weeks ago, with a lot of brutality, with a lot of persistence. The Ayatollahs are very determined to stay in power. If this regime will become a nuclear superpower, the Iranian people can forget about their dream of the free country, democracy, free travel, and all the other things that come with freedom.
We also heard Vice President Pence give a message to the Iranian people. What do you think of the message that he gave, and what would be your own message to Iranians?
The exact same message. The Israeli people are not enemies of the Iranian people. And the strange tendency to say, I'm friends with this or that dictator, hence I'm the friend of the people in that country, I think it's just a contradicting message. You have to choose. You are either with the regime of Ayatollahs, this regime that belongs to the Middle Ages and is a threat to the whole world, or you're with the Iranian people. So Vice President of the United States said loud and clear, and I'm saying loud and clear, we are friends of the Iranian people. We want them to be free. We want them to reach what they aspire for. We want them to live in a country that will be part of the human society and the world, and won't push the world back into the situation that we at least believe after the crash of Nazism and communism and other regimes was disappearing.
I'd like to also ask you about the status of Jerusalem. Vice President Pence made some news today by saying that the embassy would be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem by the end of next year. How much of a surprise was this for you?
It was a very positive statement. I was not personally surprised because I know the attitude of Vice President, of the American President towards Israel, towards this issue. But it was still very nice to hear in an official speech of the Vice President that the plans are basically all systems go. And it will take some time in terms of practical arrangements. But one message is important, and I said it to Vice President during our meeting. United States won't be for long the only embassy in Jerusalem. Many other countries will follow their example. That's why this message of moving the embassy to Jerusalem was so important. It's not just U.S.-Israel relations. It's globally changed the attitude towards Jerusalem and towards Israel as far as at least the political attitude towards our capital is concerned.
Can you share with us news of any other countries that are going to follow the U.S. anytime soon?
Yes, we heard a couple of countries in Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, their leaders saying that they're going to follow in the steps of the United States. And I had conversation with a number of speakers of parliaments. I actually sent a letter to many of my colleagues, those whom I considered friends of Israel, asking them to work in their parliaments in order to also follow the example of the United States. I had a number of phone calls from different European parliaments saying that they are with me, they're working on it, and I sincerely hope the moment there will be facts on the ground, the example will play its role.
We did see a bit of a disturbance on the floor of the Knesset today with the Arab members of the Knesset protesting Pence's presence today. How concerned are you that an expedited move of the U.S. Embassy could further upset Israeli Arabs or Palestinians or the Arab world as a whole?
Well, you know that for the last 70 years, or even rather to be more accurate, I think for the last 100-something years since the start of the Zionist movement, the Zionist settlement in this area, we've heard that every move will provoke the Middle East, provoke new military conflict, will start the war, let the sleeping dog lie, don't rock the boat, and so on and so forth. In the meanwhile, all these prognoses were not accurate, and yes, there are unfortunately attempts to start a new wave of terrorism. Yes, incitement is going on. We just heard last week the speech of the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen. Terrible things like clear-cut anti-Semitic propaganda. This entity is a European colonial enterprise, no less, and so on and so forth. It's there. It's there. We don't have to work hard in order to provoke this incitement. It's just kind of animal hatred towards everything that Israel represents, towards freedom, towards democracy, towards all the positive values that are part of a democratic country. I think that the only way to change that is to start cooperating with positive forces in the Arab world. There are many people who are sick and tired of this conflict, who are sick and tired of being held hostages by the Palestinian leadership, and developing economic ties, cultural ties, environment, water resources, technology, agriculture could put us in a different place.
I'd also like to ask you about the two-state solution. Vice President Pence reiterated that the U.S. would support a two-state solution if the two sides agree. We saw members of the opposition stand up and applaud, and the reaction was a bit more muted on the coalition side. So how strongly do you think this government supports a two-state solution?
It's a fruitless discussion right now. We can support one state, two states, three states. The circumstances are such that no political decision or agreement is possible right now, not because of the Israelis. But I do believe that we can start building peace bottom up. And then all kinds of issues that sound like irresolvable today could always suddenly be brought to a solution. So instead of concentrating on slogans, instead of asking what's your name and how are you, the first question in this country is, are you in favor of a two-state solution or against the two-state solution? It's really irrelevant. Let's try to do things. Let's try to understand that shooting each other is not the only option of coexistence in this country. Unfortunately, when we unilaterally withdrew from Gaza Strip, there were also voices of naive people in this country who said, okay, now they will have a territory of their own. There will be no Israeli presence, no IDF, nothing. It will be different. Yeah, it is different. rockets are flying, missiles are flying in our direction, tunnels are being built in order to attack Israel. That's what's different. So let's not repeat the mistakes of the past. Let's, for a change, try a different approach.
Knesset Speaker Edelstein, thank you so much for talking to VOA's Persian service today.
Thanks for having me.